Hey, everybody, welcome back to Narrative Live. We've got a special show today because we finally have a day, or we think we have a day, of when the Mueller report will finally be handed down, or publicly released, I should say. It'll be a redacted version, of course, which has been the topic of a lot of conversation. And it's all happening on a Thursday, a Holy Thursday, the day before Good Friday, when the government is shut down, and as people are beginning to head out for the recess. So it's going to be an interesting period of time in Washington, D.C. to start digesting that. Hello, Tracy. How are you?
I'm great, Zeb. How are you today?
I'm really good. Nice to see you again.
I think the biggest question, Zeb, is going to be the redactions. I mean, we know that the summary itself is something like 400 pages. We know we only got, what, 3.5 in Barr's initial letter. So where are we going to fall in between that 3.5 pages and 400? How much are we going to learn, and how much of that is going to be, a big black line like we're so used to seeing now in all of the proceedings?
I know we've gotten really used to seeing a lot of redactions, and I bet you will see a lot here. But even if we could just get the actual summaries that Mueller put together, which he did for each section, I think we'll learn a lot more than we learned from the 64 words that were included in Barr's initial report. Now, we're really excited today to have Jeannie Zaino, who's one of the smartest people I know when it comes to this kind of stuff. She's a professor and political consultant at Iona. She also works at Applied Technomics, and she joins us from New York City. Hi, Jeannie. How are you?
Good. How are you both doing?
Great. Good to see you.
Hi, Jeannie. Thanks so much.
Hi, Tracy. Good to see you. Thank you.
So, what are your thoughts as you head into this delayed release of the Mueller report, coming so close to the Easter weekend? What are your thoughts about this? Is this a delay tactic or something else?
I mean, I think we all remember when almost nothing happened on a holiday weekend. And Fridays were very quiet in the news business. And you look at the last few years, and so much of what has happened has kept newsrooms busy on Fridays, and now in this case on Thursday going into Good Friday. And I would just say that for Catholics, of course, Thursday is also a holiday. It is Holy Thursday. So it really is a holiday weekend that they are releasing this on. And to Tracy's point, I think the big question is, how much redaction are we going to see? If we see much of the grand jury testimony, for instance, blacked out, that's going to be a big problem, because we think we already suspect that much of what Mueller was able to learn, he learned from that grand jury testimony. If they indeed black much of that out, it's not going to, I think, go over well with the Democrats in Congress. So I think everybody's going to be waiting with bated breath. But I do think that the administration, it has calculated that, releasing it on a long holiday weekend when people have other things to do is going to minimize the amount of coverage, should the coverage be negative.
Absolutely.
Right. Luckily for us, Zev, as we discussed earlier, my child will be gone for the weekend, for the holiday weekend. So I have nothing else to do but read the 400 pages. So we'll be covering it anyway. But I have a question for you as well. The White House seems really, really concerned with Don McGahn's testimony to Mueller for a lot of reasons, of course. And Zev, do we have a slide or a clip of that?
We have a clip. We can do better than a slide. Let's take a look at what Jonathan Karl told George Stephanopoulos yesterday on This Week about why the White House is a little worried.
That the White House has been briefed on this overall Mueller report. What do they know? How worried are they?
George, they have been briefed, but I'm told it's in broad brushstrokes. Emmett Flood in the White House counsel's office has been briefed on the logistics, the timing of the release. They've been briefed enough to know that the White House will not invoke executive privilege to try to get further redactions. But, George, there is significant concern on the president's team about what will be in this report and will be unredacted. The good news is already out there.
Even stuff that will be unredacted.
Yes. Yes. The good news is already out there. Broad conclusion, no finding of conspiracy between the campaign and the Russians on the hack or on the interfering in the elections. But there is significant concerns about what will be in here, new information on the obstruction of justice question, on what the president was doing regarding some of the big questions. Was he trying to, how far did he go down the line of trying to fire Mueller or talk about firing Mueller? The situation surrounding the Comey firing. And what worries them most is what Don McGahn told the special counsel. It was
Former
reported,
White House counsel.
Former White House counsel Don McGahn has visibility on all of this. It was reported earlier that he spent 30 hours before the special counsel. George, I'm told it's significantly more than 30 hours. And here's the astounding thing. After all of that time before the special counsel, nobody on the president's legal team debriefed McGahn about what he was asked by the special counsel or what he told the special counsel. So the bottom line is they really don't know.
But that was a bit of a miss, not debriefing him.
Yeah, how did that happen? You know, I mean, is it just ineptness?
So it's the Trump White House. Anything can happen in the Trump White House. Jeannie, what's your sense on McGahn's testimony and what kind of impact it could have on the Mueller report, but also on the White House if it's that damning?
Yeah, I mean, they have got to be very concerned. 30 hours for one individual to talk to a bunch of special prosecutors on this team is a long time. And here's somebody who knew what was going on inside the White House as it pertains to obstruction of justice. So I think the White House is probably feeling much like it did before Mueller handed his report over to the Attorney General. They've got to be very concerned about what is revealed in there. And I have a difficult time believing that Barr has not shared some of that with the White House already. I know we're hearing that, they've been briefed just overall, but I don't know. Does anybody really believe that this guy didn't say this is what these are the top 10 things that you've got to fear the most? I have a hard time believing that, which means that they have time to prepare. And I suspect what the White House's PR machine will do, which is basically President Trump, is he will tweet in caps, no collusion, no collusion. And they will stick with that point and say obstruction is nothing, even if there's any evidence of it, move on, there's no collusion. And I suspect we're going to have a lot of back and forth in that regard.
I think you're right. And I think we've already got a hint of how they're going to approach some of the conspiracy part. Trump has been tweeting already today that he believes his campaign was spied on. It's not spying if it's a legitimate investigation. That's just surveillance. But he's already going to go down that route. We can see that that's where he's going. And he's going to accuse everyone of being a dirty cop, including Mueller, if he needs to get off this, these charges. Obstruction is a huge piece of this. But I also think there'll be interesting things still happening in the conspiracy section, because it's clear to anyone with eyes, I think, that there was some sort of conspiracy between Russia and the Trump campaign, even if it could not be proven by Mueller. And we'll see some of that in the SDNY, and we'll also see it in the DC courts. But to me, it feels like Mueller. Yeah,
so we're going to see that with Roger Stone's trial as well.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't want to forget about him.
Yeah.
And can I also just add, I think another thing to watch out for is, does the president or does the administration do anything just prior to Thursday to distract some attention from the release of this report, whether it's, bringing asylum seekers into sanctuary cities, something, or says or does something to distract attention away if they believe that the report is damning. I think we've seen a pattern of that, so we'll likely see it late Wednesday into Thursday.
Absolutely, and even into Monday. To me, it feels like impeachment could be back on the table. At least that Mueller has really forced Congress to do its job, which in my opinion is to go after this kind of thing, and maybe it wasn't his job at the end of the day. Are we looking again, in your opinion, at a possible impeachment proceedings, even if it might not succeed?
I think you're going to see a push from particularly the progressive left of the Democratic Party to move towards impeachment. I'm not so sure where the leadership stands right now. I think they have had a wait and see attitude, but I think it does depend on what the report entails. If it contains damning information, I think we're going to see a concerted push on that front rather. If it is, something that can be couched as, oh, this is a Democratic witch hunt, I think you're going to see the leadership of the Democratic Party try to, continue the investigations, continue the oversight, press on taxes and other things, but try to move on a little bit. And I think you're going to see a little of a war in the Democratic Party on that front.
Right. I think you might be right.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to, and I guess I would ask, what is the reasoning behind not letting Congress have the full unredacted report? Is Barr saying it's because he's afraid it would be leaked? I mean, what is the logical reason why Congress shouldn't have access to that? Not the public, Congress.
Yeah, it's a curious question because, they often get, things that are secure. And so you would think that at least members of certain committees could be allowed to, for instance, as we've seen with past reports, go into a, concealed area, read the full report, and then leave, whether or not they're allowed to take a copy out, right? Something like that would seem to make sense, at least for certain members on certain committees who have to make important decisions, and obviously both Democrats and Republicans in that case. We don't seem to be headed in that direction, and that's something I think Democrats maybe need to push for a little more. Again, I think it's going to depend an awful lot. Thursday, if they don't redact a lot, there may be no reason to push on that. But if you see a heavily redacted piece, I do think Democrats are going to say, if this is for security reasons or because it would impact trials going on or investigations going on, we at least should be able to see it. And, I think there's going to be then a concerted fight on that front with the Justice Department.
It's really interesting because what you're also hinting at, I think, is the refusal to hand over the tax documents. There's now a request going to be putting today a subpoena for 10 years of financial records of Trump's, and both of those things, including the stalling on the Mueller reports, feel to me like we're heading into a constitutional crisis where the executive branch is really taking away the power of the House. Is that what happens in those cases? I know we all talk about constitutional crises a lot, but how do we actually resolve them?
It's fascinating because our history is a history of battles between the legislature and the White House. So this is nothing new, to your point, and I do think we're going to see that. And I just want to play devil's advocate a little bit and say, had Congress acted, and if they would act now in a more concerted manner, some of these issues would not even come to the forefront. So I do think Congress bears responsibility. That's not to say individual members in now, but in my mind, for instance, I don't think we see a Donald Trump elected president if Congress had taken steps to act on the issue of immigration long before now, because of course his campaign was all about immigration. So, as a political scientist, I have to say Congress bears responsibility for its failure to act in so many areas that has allowed so much of what we're seeing today. And I do agree, Zeb, that I do think we start to approach a constitutional crisis. And by the way, I think we all bear some blame as well as citizens, because if we're not vigilant, there's things happening and not happening under our watch. And, this is where we end up.
Absolutely.
Right. And, this election, I believe, was a wake-up call that a lot of American voters needed.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, let's move on to the 2020 because we do have a future, and hopefully in a democracy. We're looking at Pete Buttigieg. That's my first time saying his name on the show. Hope I didn't screw it up too much. Tracy had an interesting question earlier on about whether, if America isn't ready for a woman president, is it ready for a gay man? And we're not talking about in broad terms. In those important swing states, can a gay man be elected? And in the South, can a gay man be elected? Any thoughts about that?
First of all, he has had a remarkable rise. You look at the latest polls, and he is number 3 in some of these key state polls. I mean, It's absolutely fascinating. And it's also fascinating why so many members of the Senate who are running have not enjoyed that kind of bump. And I think part of it is people still want a Washington outsider. There's still a real suspicion about Washington. So people running from Congress have a really difficult time. To your question, it's hard to know. I think we're going to have to see. I think Democratic primary voters are ready to elect a, gay man, gay woman. I don't know about the general public, and I think that's the big question. That said, it is remarkable the shift in public opinion on the issue of gay marriage and other things. I mean, I talk to young people all the time, and conservative Republican young people are much what we would describe more liberal on that issue than their, older counterparts. So it's been a remarkable shift in a very short period of time. I mean, I think we can't forget that Barack Obama, when he was elected, was against gay marriage and then had this shift. So it has moved quickly. And, my take is that you look at the polls, Democratic primary goers will be fine with it. You know, are absolutely willing to elect somebody who is gay. And I just think it's a question of our general election goers in the same ballpark. And I don't think we know yet. You know, I think the question about women is fascinating, because women, I think, are less in a position at this point to get elected, if you judge on recent history. And I think it's a really frustrating, you know, situation we find ourselves in with 57% of the population.
And really a flawed logic, because, you know, yes, one campaign didn't succeed, but when you really look at the numbers, Hillary did win, and certainly won the popular vote. And a lot of what was not won was possibly rigged or influenced through, you know, social media or other improper methods. But yeah, it does. Your point is well taken.
And you know, and sorry to interrupt, though, I just wanted to say that one of the most confounding parts of the data is that female voters are often harder on female candidates than their male counterparts. And you look at the amount of support that Donald Trump got from female voters, and that speaks volumes. So there's an awful lot of work to do there on why we as women judge female candidates more harshly in many cases than we judge their male counterparts. And I think, you know, there's an awful lot of scientific research to be done on that question. But in the United States, it's a big challenge because we rob ourselves of potentially really good leadership when we do that.
Absolutely.
I would also, yeah, and Zev, I would also ask you, you know, we should look into, are the female candidates getting the same MSM coverage as the male? I mean, is Kamala or Elizabeth Warren getting as much coverage as Pete? I mean, that has an effect on voters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you look at the top 3 candidates, and they are right now 3 white males. And
Correct.
It does speak volume. And I think, to your point, is there an institutional discrimination that is going on where women are not getting the coverage and unable institutional discrimination that is, you know, making this playing field uneven, as you know, if you will? I think it's a big question, because there is this, you know, sense in the United States still that as much as people are open to a female candidate, they can't seem to break through that final glass ceiling, at least at this point. Maybe we'll be wrong by 2020. I hope so.
I hope so too, especially people like Elizabeth Warren, who's doing an amazing job on the campaign trail with policy after policy that makes so much sense and different in thinking and has a great ground game. It would be really sad not to see her on the ticket. And even if she doesn't win the nomination, I certainly hope there is a place for her on the ticket, because she's the kind of person who can achieve things in the Senate, and, you know, as does Kamala, but in a different way. The really crucial economic issues, I think Elizabeth Warren has a much bigger handle on. It'll be great to see either of them on the ticket if they don't rise up, but if things don't change. But we're still early on in the game. I think that there is plenty of opportunity for women to still be leading this pack, and a lot can happen between now and, you know, we are still far away, November next year.
Yes, and Zev, we've made a promise to our viewers that we will be covering all of the candidates. So you may not be seeing it on other channels, but if you stick with us, you will see it here.
Jeannie, it's been really great having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll come back. You're one of my favorite person when it comes to analyzing anything politically and otherwise. And Tracy, it's always nice to see you again. So thank you both for being on the show today. And Tracy will be back with some big exclusives this week.
We're working hard this week. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great one.
Cheers.
Thank you.